Kia ora, welcome to Womenpower. This week we'll speak to community activist Rupa Suchdev about the position of South Asian women in New Zealand. We'll also talk to feminist mother Jessie Hume about how to use social media to advance women's causes. But first, an update on the Women's Election Agenda Aotearoa 2014. That's a 100-point plan for advancing women's equality in 2014. You can find it on the Facebook page, Women's Election Agenda Aotearoa 2014. We sent the agenda to the 9 main political parties and asked them to tell us which points they supported. The first detailed response we've received is from Māori Party co-leader Catriona. She took the time to go through the agenda in fine detail and provide a similarly detailed response. Ms Turia first listed areas in which she thought the Māori Party's policies aligned with those in the Women's Election Agenda Aotearoa. These were outcomes in the workforce, parenting, leadership, disability and credit and financial literacy. Ms Turia provided 3 tables with her responses. The second table set out areas in which she believes the Māori Party should extend its position either to adopt the Women's Agenda position in full or to integrate particular aspects of it into the Māori Party's policy. The main areas covered in Table 2 are violence against women, benefits and sport. Ms Turia's third table sets out aspects of the Women's Agenda which the Māori Party now intends to incorporate as new additions to its policy. That covers 27 points of the Women's Agenda relating to education programs about domestic violence, funding for women's refuges, benefits, better services for sexual violence survivors, and not sending mothers to prison following convictions for benefit fraud. Women's Affairs Minister Jo Goodhue has responded to our letter about the agenda by saying she will consider it in detail and provide a full response by 19 May. We'll report back to you in later programs on the responses from other political parties. Now, let's welcome Rupa Suchdev to talk about challenges for South Asian women living in New Zealand. Kia ora, Rupa, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me, Catriona. How are you today?
I'm good, thanks. What are some of the issues for South Asian women living in New Zealand?
There are too many. But some of the common issues that South Asian women, they have faced domestic violence, physical violence, mental, emotional, and social sexual abuses. Most of these occur at home and in office as well. And yeah, because of lack of communication, lack of their standings and lack of their response, so it's really very difficult for them to face these problems.
It's very hard if you don't speak the language of the country that you're living in.
Exactly, and they can't communicate with other people and they can't express themselves that what they want exactly. So it's really very difficult for them to elaborate, and they will say in a few words, but they don't understand what she wants to say. So it's difficult and it's a real issue for us.
When did you set up the Rupa Orap Charitable Trust?
It's a long story. It has been set up. It has been set up last 20 years, but officially it has been set up last in 2008. Officially.
And what does the trust do?
Trust is called Jagriti. Jagriti means awakeness, awareness, and we say, "Wake up, dear! It's a time to fight." And Jagriti support group is not all about the victims. We have team of qualified expert doctors, psychologists and counselors and medical education things, just you name it, and we have it.
And you do self-defense classes for women, is that right?
Actually, we are doing our workshops for the defense classes because we had one victim previously, we have seen, and she was beaten by someone, and it was really very bad for a woman to be beaten by a stranger. Then we started thinking, why not to start something like that? The woman can defend herself, she can protect herself. It's the dignity of a woman. So we spoke to self-defense people and with policemen, and they really supplied too many things for us, and they said they are ready to do our defense classes. And we are doing workshops right now, but not the defense classes. But in future, maybe we'll start in like every week or fortnight. And
you also have computer classes for women?
Oh yes, yes. So we have computer. You know, the technology is too vast, and everyone want to do something. And Google, you can go. It's a small word in a computer. You can search anything, you can Google anything. It expands your knowledge. So I think computer classes are must for each and every person. And the women, they can't communicate, and especially we teach English as well. And we are taking English classes so that they can sit and do their own things. They can write their own CVs. They can write whatever they want. They can do their own activities on computer. And they know where the word is going on. We have to update ourselves.
What help do domestic violence victims need?
They need some, I think, emotional and moral support. And of course, we try to save them if they want to stay in the same house. And of course, there is a protection, and if they want to move out from their house, we help them. We help them for the WINS, IRD, and we educate them each and everything when they come out of their home. We also ask them to start some driving lessons as well, because they will be mobile and they can go and do things by their own. Otherwise, it is very difficult. They have to ask us, oh, please come and pick me up, I have to go. You know, it's very difficult. I'm not sure, though we have a very big volunteer team, but you know, sometimes it is really very difficult for us. But it's not very much funded. Funding is very limited, so we try to do things through our volunteers, and they are really wonderful people. They help us, and
How can New Zealand women help South Asian women who are living in New Zealand? Is there support that they need?
I think they are supporting them a lot already. I am lies with the Shine group, and they all are mostly New Zealand women's. And there are too many things for the women. They have regular workshops, regular seminars. They teach them how to come out, how to start things by their own. And I think they are really they are very helpful for them. And of course, if there is something they can't they can't communicate, or they don't have, we have interpreter among us, so that they can do things for them.
Oh, that's really important, is it, to make sure that communication happens properly?
Yeah. Even they go to court when the women, they can't express themselves in the court, they have their hearing, and we provide our interpreter there, and they all are very qualified and expert.
Thanks very much, Rupa.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, and thank you very much for your time and my time as well.
You're welcome. Now it's time for the Womenpower Fail and Womenpower Win. Parliament's Social Services Select Committee is hearing submissions on the inadequate funding provided for sexual violence services. Meanwhile, a golf tournament hosted by Sir Michael Hill at his private course near Queenstown has received more than $2 million in the past 3 years, despite the fact it's repeatedly failed to meet the performance targets attached to the funding. Check out the American Women's Media Centre at www.womensmediacentre.com for a wonderful resource about media depictions of women and resources to combat sexism in the media. The Centre produces an annual Status of Women in the US Media report. Its media guide to covering reproductive issues is a resource for reporters and editors. The Centre's researchers found that, although women make up 51% of the American population, they're only 24% of news sources. In articles discussing abortion, 72% of the bylines are male and only 20% are female. The Centre has also published a media guide to gender-neutral coverage of women candidates and politicians. Now, let's welcome a feminist mother, Jessie Hume, to talk about using social media to campaign for change and being a feminist mother to a young son. Kia ora, Jessie, welcome to the program.
Hi.
You organised New Zealand's largest ever petition in a short time with your petition last year calling for changes to the way that sexual violence against women is dealt with. How can women use social media to push for change?
Well, I think social media can be really, really useful, and I think one of the ways in that it's useful is that at the core of social media is networking, and I think one of the most important things is to be able to build your networks as an individual and work in groups.
And what changes do you think need to be made in relation to sexual violence against women?
Well, obviously I think more funding is important. I think specialised sexual violence courts are important, and campaigns on consent.
Okay. And how can women use social media to press for these changes more effectively? Because we don't really seem to get much of a hearing other than when something's in the media like Roastbusters.
Well, what I actually did, initially I started by just making a Facebook post, and I tagged all of the people who I thought might be interested. And this was in response to Willie and JT's question, specifically the question where they asked the young girl who was talking about her concern about this issue when she lost her virginity. And that really incensed me, and I think it incensed a lot of other people too. And so I tagged people who I thought might be interested in a response, and I asked them to tag other people who they thought also might be interested. And what we got was a really huge spread of really informed, interesting people. Then we started a national group and just invited friends or people that we thought might be interested in organising a response to that group. And there was such a huge spread of people and such a great response. And after that, people sort of spontaneously formed their own groups, their working units, and had meetings. And almost every single group that went away came back with the same response, and that was, this is not just about Roastbusters, this is about rape culture, and we want to do something about that. And because of that, that allowed us to, when we did our media work, that allowed us to have a unified kind of response, and to we couldn't control the flow of everything that happened, but what we were able to do is express one idea very clearly. And so that was how things unfolded.
And is change.org, is that a good vehicle for women to use?
Absolutely, and I think that one thing that would be really good is if somebody did have a really important issue was to go to change.org. And although my name was on the petition, change.org managed that really well, and they have such a good process, and it's good to ask them for their support on big issues. And I think the advice that I would give is that, you know, everything that we do together. There isn't one person that does anything. It's all the result of a lot of motivated and a lot of people working in combination with one another.
What else specifically do you think we women need to be doing this year?
Well, I would suggest that working, again, forming groups with people who have who realise that there are a lot of major women's issues that need to be attended to. I think the big issues are things that you've brought up, so things like the underrepresentation of women in Parliament is really, really huge. It's very hard for us to get women's issues to be heard if women are underrepresented. So I think in terms of actions and voting, these things are important. I also think that we can, my advice would be form a group of friends and start thinking about how we're going to get movement, and that might be we're going to write letters, we're going to write to MPs, we're going to find out what our MP thinks about these specific women's issues and publish that information. You know, being creative with the group and pooling resources is a really important way of affecting change.
Mm. You're also a mum to an 18-month-old son. How is it being a feminist mum to a son? Is it a challenge or not?
Yeah, it's absolutely a challenge. There's a lot of pressures on males, particularly, a lot of sort of hypermasculinity and a lot of bullying around gender conformity. I have a lot of male feminist ally friends and trans friends as well, and I talk to them for their advice, and I try and reach out to people around me. But it's not easy, yeah. There are things that I try and do with Ames, and one of the things is to he's very little, so it's going to be challenges as they arrive. It's going to be challenges as they arrive, and that's when I will be reaching out to friends and I will be asking those questions. But the simple things, even at a little age, are ensuring there's not sort of encouraged toward hypermasculinity, and he's not given, you know, toys and play that sort of reinforce that. But also simple things like allowing him to understand that expressing his emotions is important, and that how to do that safely. So putting words to his emotions. You seem angry, or you seem sad, and just allowing the freedom for this. Yeah. So that's kind of
yeah, because we've got a very macho culture in New Zealand, and there's sort of a very limited way that it's actually acceptable for men to behave.
It's so narrow. And a lot of men are really, really seriously affected by this, and there's so much intense bullying and pressure, and there's also a lot of other really negative things like commenting on penis size, things like that, that are really quite cruel to men, and they put a lot of pressure on them. And those things are things that I think I would love as a mother to be able to protect my son from, but I can't always. Some of the best things that I can do is also socialising with people who have similar values about how to protect and nourish boys as well. And, you know, realising that I guess you can't control everything. You're always going to be around other people with different values, and just doing the best you can, yeah, at home, really.
Thanks very much, Jessie.
Thank you.
Now it's time for News of the Week. The European Union is making only limited progress in improving gender equality, according to a progress report issued on 14 April by the European Commission. The annual Gender Equality Report said that at current rates of progress, it would take almost 30 years to reach the EU's target of 70% of women in employment, 70 years to make equal pay a reality, and 20 years to achieve parity in national parliaments. A pioneering anti-domestic violence project which helps perpetrators through anger management is at risk of closure. Stop, or Start Treating Others Positively, is based in Central Leeds and could close at the end of May after its 4-year lottery grant runs out. The annual cost of dealing with domestic violence in Leeds is estimated to be £320 million. Potential 2016 American presidential candidate Hillary Clinton spoke at the opening of the Women in the World conference in New York. She quoted Eleanor Roosevelt's statement that women wanting to be involved in public life had to grow skins as thick as rhinoceros hide. Ms Clinton also said that, although women's equality had been argued as a moral and a political argument, it could also be put as an economic argument. Where women were more equal, there was less instability and fewer conflicts. Women with greater rights could make increased economic contributions. Guam has led the way for other American states by setting up a register of repeat family violence offenders. The register will record the names of those who've been convicted at least twice of family violence offences. More girls have been killed in the past 50 years because they were girls than men have been killed in all the wars of the 20th century. Women aged between 15 and 45 are more likely to be maimed or die from male violence than from cancer, malaria, traffic accidents and war combined. Approximately 7,000 American troops died in Iraq and Afghanistan between 2002 and 2012. 11,000 more women were killed in the United States as a result of domestic violence in the same period. In the United States, violence against women and girls is an epidemic that affects 1 in 4 women in their lifetimes. April has been marked as a month of action against domestic violence. A new campaign, Te Invito, has been launched to engage Latino men and boys in the fight against domestic violence. An Iranian rape victim facing hanging has been told that she can avoid the gallows if she complies with terms for forgiveness set by the son of the rapist. The woman killed her attacker after being lured to a flat where she was sexually assaulted. Iran's legal system gives victims' families the right to grant clemency, but the son is demanding that she change her version of events if she wants to avoid execution. Italian Prime Minister Matteo Renzi has appointed women to oversee Italy's most important state companies as he moves to change Italy's sexist culture. He said that Italy had been the country of bunga bunga, but now women were in charge of foreign affairs and defence and led the largest Italian companies. Women have been appointed as presidents of the post office, electricity company and national grid system. The OECD has compiled statistics about who does the most housework in different countries. The figures show that there is greatest equality in the time spent on tasks in the home in Sweden, Norway, Spain, the United States and Canada. The least equal were Turkey, Italy, Mexico and Portugal. The United Nations Economic Commission for Africa has unveiled a new continent-wide initiative on gender equality and women's empowerment. A group of 800 Moroccan women has staged a march in the capital, Rabat, calling for a constitutional guarantee of gender equality to be introduced in the kingdom. The march from the city centre of Parliament was led by the Civil Coalition for the application of Article 19, an umbrella organisation of 500 NGOs. Marchers carried banners calling for a comprehensive review of all discriminatory laws, women's safety in public places and equality as a right, not a privilege. More than a century after the death of Raden Ajeng Kartini, the first Indonesian woman to demand the emancipation of women, activists say that progress towards equality is slow. Indonesia is ranked 132nd out of 187 countries in the United Nations Development Programme's Gender Inequality Index. Women in a variety of occupations face discrimination in relation to salary disparities, sexual harassment and unfair dismissal. Female students from the Guangdong University of Technology called for equal job opportunities and for people to pay attention to the value of women in a protest on campus during which they were covered in body paint. Now it's time for this week's 5 action points. Meet with or email your MP to let him or her know what gender equality policies you want advanced in 2014. Write to party leaders and Prime Minister John Key to tell them what issues of importance to women will influence your vote at the 2014 election. Volunteer to provide support to women from South Asian communities living in New Zealand. Offer to be an English language tutor for refugee and migrant women. Volunteer to assist refugee and migrant women with practicalities relating to their new lives in Aotearoa, such as opening bank accounts or obtaining a driver's licence. That's our program for this week. Join us next week when we'll speak to feminist mother Julie Timmins about unconscious bias and how it can be overcome. We'll also hear from designer Anna Stretton about her new mentoring program for domestic violence survivors. Thanks for watching. Ka kite anō.